Hey there and welcome back to another Disney video. And today we're going to be ranking Disney princesses because, well, I'm a full-grown man who likes Disney princess films. What you going to do about it? And yeah, nothing really else to say in that regard. There's been a lot of Disney princess movies, with these movies creating its own little mini franchise over the years. The Disney princesses, of which there are 13 members. And today we're going to work our way through them and decide who is the best. I don't really have any strong criteria, it's just my completely subjective take on who's the worst and who's the best. I'm really just running off the vibes of everything, you get me?
It's Marbo, it's justice, it's law, it's the vibe, and no, that's it, it's the vibe.
Okay, so straight away we have at least one disqualification, and that is Mulan. I don't care what Disney says. She ain't a Disney princess. She comes from what seems to be a rather prominent family in her village, that's true. And I would assume that based on the context in the film, at some point she's going to marry Shang, and that dude is just a captain in the army. He's not the emperor's son. He isn't a prince. And so she does not fit the bill here. She just doesn't. I'm sorry. Get out of here, son. I'm sure that they try to say that she has the spirit of a Disney princess or whatever, but tough luck. You can't just redefine what being a princess actually is to suit your narrative. Nope, no chance, Mickey Mouse. Disqualified. Auto bottom rank. And then I was a little bit unsure here because we have Merida, and she's a pretty cool character. An actual proper princess as well, but does she count as a Disney princess? Like, I know to Disney it counts. But what do you guys think? Does a Pixar character really make the cut? Because I'm on the fence. If not, she'd probably go here in the disqualified pile. Above Mulan, of course, because let's put some respect on her name. She's still an actual princess and all that. Yeah, I'll come back to this in a little while, I think, because screw it, I think she makes the cut, so we'll move her higher up. Oh, and a bit embarrassing, as I did actually have to go back to add this part on after it was too late to just scrap the video because I already spent so much time writing it out. But I've never seen Pocahontas, ever, so I can't exactly rank her anywhere. Whoops, disqualified. Probably should have checked that out beforehand, but it is what it is. So let's move into the lower tier, I suppose, and we'll start with Aurora. For me, this character has to be the blandest, most generic, most boring of all the Disney princesses. Like, she has no real defining characteristics or moments aside from her iconic song. Then she's just unconscious or off screen for most of the important moments of the film. She's truly the epitome of the damsel in distress trope that dominated the early Disney princess films and characters. And this isn't me inflicting modern thoughts onto the story and characters or anything, because even when the film came out in the 50s, she was still labelled as a less interesting rip-off of Snow White and Cinderella. In fact, her film did so poorly with audiences and with critics, whilst also being a box office disappointment, that Disney straight up stopped making Disney princess films for 30 years. So to say she's a good example and that she should be the top rank, it's a bold-faced lie. In the trash you go. Next up, and this really was a bit of a toss-up for me, but I had to go Snow White. And it hurts because she's the OG. And her design, it's timeless and it's classic. And she has that great old-timey singing voice. Seriously, you just don't hear voices like that in this day and age. It's a classic. But beyond that, what's her character? She's a good cleaner, I guess, and she's very nice. But way too passive. She has no agency in the narrative. She does nothing in the story that actually progresses anything. She takes no actions. In the end, she's just another damsel to be saved by the dwarfs, the huntsman, the prince. And so here she goes. And Cinderella, well, she's a little bit better than this. While she's obviously a rather passive character, much like Snow White, she does set herself apart in a decently crucial way. She actually works to try and improve her circumstances. She works to try to improve her life. Despite having to do all the housework and the chores for her cartoonishly cruel stepfamily, she manages to make her own dress for the ball, with the help of her animal friends, to try to get herself in and perhaps improve her circumstances, get married or something. Shows a bit of an independent streak, however small, even if she is still largely passive and pretty much a damsel in distress that doesn't have much of a personality to speak of. And thus I think her ranking just gets a little smidgen higher than Snow White. Although hold up. Nah, screw it, swap 'em. We're going Cinderella, then Snow White. And why? Because Cinderella, I mean, she's got a good ball design, you know, the ballroom dress, but it's still kind of bland and generic compared to the all-time great Snow White dress. Classic, iconic. One of the great all-time designs. And thus I think Cinderella's sort of personality, the gap between that and Snow White's lack of personality is much smaller than the design gap, which is very enormous. And so I think overall, Snow White's going to win the day here. Whoops. And this is where the competition starts to get a whole lot stiffer. And it was also at this point that I noticed that apparently Anna and Elsa, they're just not official Disney princesses, because I guess they're not. I mean, maybe they were so popular that they don't even need that branding. It would just drag them down. Frozen's big business, but I found it strange that they didn't include them in this. I figured, it just gives Disney more opportunity to sell more types of merch. They can double dip, but whatever, not my circus. Saves me having to try to cram them into an already crowded top tier. But now we're hitting that mid tier. And first up, we'll go Jasmine. Look, this is one of the most mixed receptions I've ever seen when I was doing some of the research for this part. Because on one hand, she does have some really cool elements. She's forward-thinking, she's progressive, an iconic design, although somehow I doubt that's very historically accurate. And at times it even feels maybe a bit fetishy. But I'll admit, I don't actually know. But at the same time, she still very much feels like a proto-feminist character. It was clear the creators knew that they couldn't just have some bland, arcless character there to serve as Aladdin's reward, so to speak. So they did give her some character, some personality. She pushes against boundaries, she escapes the castle, she wants to buck the system, and yet she still remains pretty much a bystander the entire film. Because this is Aladdin's movie, Aladdin's story, and her big contribution is as a goal for him to strive for. As well as her false seduction of Jafar to try to distract him for Aladdin. But that's all really. And on top of that, the actual romantic element is very bland. That's actually one of the more boring aspects of what is a fairly good film. A classic of the Renaissance era. And so, yeah, here she stays. On the other side of the coin though, we have Ariel. She's far less of a feminist icon. Let's be real, she doesn't really push too many gender boundaries. But she does have a lot of personality. She's cheeky and an inquisitive romantic. Her design is among one of Disney's most iconic of all time, and she has some really great moments, belting out one of the all-time great Disney songs, In Part of Your World. On top of that, she can be a force of nature and is willfully stubborn at times, carving out the path she wants to take all by herself. But of course, there's the rub. That path is not necessarily the greatest one. She is willing to change the most important things about herself for a man. And in the end, it's him who comes to save her from the big bad sea witch. It's not exactly an inspiring story in the end, and in fact, pushback regarding her characterization is what led to the further development of Disney princesses, namely Belle, because Disney didn't want that negativity surrounding their films anymore, and they were a little bit embarrassed, I think. They wanted to not be seen as so deeply behind the times with super outdated tropes and stereotypes. Next up, and we're probably in the high tier now, we'll go with Merida. Merida's just awesome. Bit of a wild child who completely refuses to conform to the expectations of society. That very same society that demands she gives in and be a sweet little princess and get married to a boy. They try to set her up, and instead of just doing that and marrying one of them and choosing one, or even just waiting for a nice normal boy to come and save the day like Jasmine does, she decides that she's going to save herself. Her tale is free of romance. And it's solely dedicated to showcasing Merida, showing that the princess can not just be the damsel or the love interest, but the actual hero of the story, the main hero, the one who makes it all happen. No hidden swooning agendas here. And so that, plus a cool and unique design, lands her in the top tier. But at the same time, I do feel like the character is really, really forgettable, and thus it's not really fair to move her up any higher than she is here. Next up, and I feel like this could be a bit controversial, but next up I'd go Belle. First up, we have a lot of positives. In terms of her personality, for her time, she was one of the most fleshed out of all the contenders. She's very much presented as the main character of her movie. She's brave, she's determined, she's intelligent, and she's fierce. She avoids a lot of the pitfalls and stereotypes that we generally associate with the classical Disney princess. And it was her character that really redefined the role of the princess film that would be carried forward and would continue to develop over the next, 30 years. Where's the time going? Where? On top of that, she has not one, not two, but three of the all-time best Disney designs. Her classic country girl outfit, the one where she puts on the hood, and then of course, the ballroom gown. Absolutely the most iconic dress in Disney history, I think. Probably even beats out Snow White's classic getup. That's how important this bad boy is. Who can forget that goddamn golden dress? On top of that, I think it's impressive how layered and how complex the relationship between Belle and Beast is, especially for the times. He starts off the story holding her hostage in exchange for letting her father go free, and he acts like a spoiled brat for much of that time. But by the end, they really do have you believing in the romance, despite those problematic elements. She doesn't feel like a prize or a reward. She feels like a fully fledged person with thoughts and feelings who's chosen this man. But at the same time, she's not going to get pushed around. On top of that, she's extremely kind and extremely empathetic, as well as being extremely brave. And indeed, it would take a very long time for her to be topped across the board, all the way to the revival era. And here it starts to get really difficult, getting really hard, honestly, because almost nothing's separating these characters at these points. And so next up, I think we got to go with Tiana. Great character, a really unique one in that her story's more grounded in the real world, or as real as you can be when you're using magic, as opposed to the fantastical Renaissance realms that some of our other princesses inhabit. And I think that it works in her favour because it makes her feel more realistic, more relatable, but at the same time, I think it also hurts her and hurts her story. I've seen plenty of discussion over the years about how the film didn't really dive deeply into things like race relations, etc. I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but I think it's a legit complaint. And it's exacerbated because you're putting her in a time period where those things would be relevant and would cause a struggle, but they don't really in the story. Also, at times, just personally, her romance did kind of rub me the wrong way. She's an industrious and hardworking woman who's lived a life of hard times. And she fails to get the property she needs to open her restaurant, something she and her late father had dreamed of. But then in the course of a single day, she falls in love with a previously handsome prince who had come to their city to try to marry Tiana's friend just to get his hands on her money. And in like a single day, she manages to change this person and suddenly he wants to marry her. And so they get married and his family funds her restaurant, right? I think that's how it goes. Jeez, feels kind of icky and transactional. And it definitely went against the hard work pays off message to me. Also, yeah, her dress is pretty cool at the party. Too bad they kept her as a frog for like almost the entire film. Next up, Rapunzel. Love me some Rapunzel. One of the most unique designs for a Disney princess, specifically the hair. And while she has a love interest, it doesn't necessarily usurp her arc and storyline. Her story is to find herself out in the great wide world, to find where she belongs, whilst breaking free of the abusive grip of Mother Gothel. Her dynamic with Flynn is just an additional bonus, and whilst he does save her in the end, it's not an egregious Flynn is the true hero style of ending. After all, she had taken the lead and saved him numerous times throughout the film. She's three-dimensional as a character, with goals and motivations which shift as she goes along in her journey. Her dynamics with different characters evolve as the story progresses in ways that make sense, with her romance feeling earned, much more earned than many princesses that came before. And you see them fall for each other over the course of the story. Still only takes like a day, but it is what it is. It's Disney we're talking about. I don't expect much. And yet despite all her trauma and pain, she's still bubbly, she's still happy, and she's loved by all. Excellent character. And then there were two. Next up will go Raya. I'll be real, I don't like this movie at all. So I think it goes to show just how well this princess was made that she can claim my second top spot. And I think there's two main points of awesome to look at. She looks cool in a very subdued sort of way. That's the first one. She's a wandering warrior. It's a completely new vibe for the franchise, the Disney Princess franchise. Previously, they pretty much all wear dresses except Mulan. And that's only when Mulan's pretending to be a man. But yeah, she has a badass look. Her character doesn't really have a romance angle, I think. I mean, I guess it's up to interpretation, isn't it? She's allowed to grow. She grows outside of that romantic box. And it works because her character and her desire to save the world, to redeem her failures, combines with her complicated relationship with Namaari and her newfound friendships to create a massively layered character with a whole lot of complexity. One that's deeply sympathetic, strong, independent, emotionally moving. Good stuff. The character truly carries the film in my eyes. I do not think the plot is up to snuff, but the character is. Excellent character. A premium example of the modern day Disney princess and what that sort of character needs to look like. And then we come to Moana, who I find to be by far the best. Top tier songs, check. Changed the game for Disney princesses, check. I think she was the first one to have no romantic relationship within the film. No desire to have one. No hint of one. Obviously, Raya would follow on from that formula, but Moana did it first, and that means something. And she did it really well because you don't even miss it. You don't even feel, oh, is there going to be a romantic interest? Nah, you're not even thinking about it. You're thinking about the grand adventure. On top of that, she's well designed. She looks cool. She uses an obviously idealized character design, but she still feels more real than most Disney princesses had before. On top of that, she's an incredible underdog type of character. One that you want to see succeed. One that you want to root for because there's so much going against her. So much she has to contend with, and yet she keeps on going. She has her goals and she wants to see them through. She has that desire to restore her culture, their people's way of life, and she manages to win over a god through the power of her belief. She feels human in a way that many of the Disney princesses don't. They feel like characters in movies, but she feels kind of real. And so I think that's why she tops my list. And so yeah, that's the end of my long-winded and convoluted list that doesn't probably make much sense, and was really just floating along based on my vibes. And so I guess I'll just remind you that these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of my list? Do you like it, hate it? Am I an idiot? You can be honest with me. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.